Mark, we are continuing to follow developments out of the Middle East, where Iranian and Israeli media channels now reporting that a ceasefire between the two nations has taken effect. Donald Trump is also confirming that and urging the two sides not to violate it. In fact, just hours ago, the U.S. president took to social media, claiming that the countries had reached out to him, in his words, almost simultaneously about peace. Now, the president's comments coming as sirens blared across parts of Israel after Iran fired missiles toward the country early Tuesday morning. Israeli officials saying that at least 5 people were killed when a residential building was hit in the southern city of Beersheba. Both sides fired missiles before the ceasefire was set to begin. I want to get some analysis now from Mehran Kamrava, professor of government at Georgetown University in Qatar. Professor, thank you so much for taking some time to join us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I would love to get started by just getting just a sense of what people where you are talking about. Fortunately, it didn't go beyond just some of the dramatic pictures that we saw of people running in malls and also some of the debris falling towards the ground. Again, no injuries in that. Still, though, what have people been talking about today after what took place, after Iran launched this series of attacks?
Well, I think it's fair to say we were all shocked last night when Iran attacked, and the sense of disbelief was palpable. The fear, the noises, the shaking was absolutely shocking, and we all went to bed fearing for the worst, and then we woke up again surprised, but this time for the better, learning that overnight a ceasefire deal had been struck. And so I think there's a sigh of relief. As you know, Qatar is one of the world's safest countries. Every year on various indices, Doha comes out as the world's safest city. And so people here are not used to this sort of development. And so I think there is a huge sigh of relief this morning.
Yeah, what a contrast. You go to bed and then wake up the next morning to breaking news of a ceasefire. Professor, let's get into some of the policy now of it all. You have said that the regime change that the U.S. president has floated would be destined to fail. Why is that? Especially if you consider that the current regime is deeply unpopular among many of its own people.
Absolutely. The government is extremely unpopular, particularly in urban centers, among the middle classes, or what is left of the Iranian middle class and upper classes. But I think it's important to note that popular discontent by itself is not enough for the collapse of the government. First of all, this is a political system that has multiple dimensions. It has deep roots. It has various representatives. It also has the diehard support of anywhere between 15 to 20% of the population that is motivated by the government's ideology. And there's also a palpable lack of a viable opposition. So I think effecting regime change might sound good in theory, but in practice, it's not feasible.
So that's Iran. Let's talk Israel for a moment. What do you make of that country's government remaining silent now, 2 hours and 20 minutes into this apparent ceasefire? I mean, could this be interpreted as Israel not being on board?
It very well could. And apparently, according to the terms of the agreement, Israel has a right to respond to the latest volley of Iranian missiles, whereby while Iran does not. Now, that is a possibility, but I think it's important to keep in mind that the Iranians have actually proved the deadly effectiveness of their missiles and their ability to penetrate the Iron Dome. And I think that is not a lesson that is lost on Israeli military commanders and the civilian leadership. A civilian leadership, mind you, whose political position domestically, at least up until the outbreak of the war with Iran, was woefully precarious. And so I think the Israeli government now is taking pause and trying to assess its various options.
What about when you look at Israel's potential expanded objective here? We saw after the United States' intervention over the weekend, we saw that they continued with their campaign. Could that perhaps hint that Israel has expanded beyond just seeking a nuclear-free Iran? Does it have perhaps even more objectives now? Otherwise, I assume they would have actually held back their campaign when the United States launched their bombers.
Absolutely. In fact, statements coming out of Jerusalem indicate that they were after dismantling Iran's missile system. They were after decapitating the civilian leadership. And it would not be surprising if Israel wanted really to see turning Iran into where Libya is today, tragically, or where Syria was and has been during its civil war, and Iraq after 2003. So I think it does serve Israel's interest if Iran's political leadership is so weakened that it cannot exert control over the territory, over Iranian territory. That does not seem to have happened. And so Israel's objective, if we look at it that way, really was not met.
And just as we were speaking here, Professor, we just received a statement on behalf of the government of Israel, and in it, the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu confirming that, in fact, that they did convene the Security Cabinet together, along with the Minister of Defense, to address this. That Israel, they say, has eliminated a dual existential threat. Additionally, I'm trying to just read through this as we speak right now, but essentially agreeing, at least in part, to some of these terms, apparently, of this ceasefire. I'm going to continue to go over this a little bit deeper, but just initially, the fact that Israel is now responding, could that be now a positive sign in these developments?
Absolutely. It is definitely a positive sign. When elephants fight, the grass suffers. It's the civilians in Israel, the civilians in Iran that have borne the brunt of this, not the military or civilian leadership on either side. And so what we have seen is nothing other than misery, fear, trepidation, kind of existential fear. And I think it would be a wonderfully positive development if saner heads prevail and there's an end, at least to this hostility. Now we have to worry about the genocide in Gaza.
And in that statement, Israel says that it has agreed to the president's proposal for a bilateral ceasefire. However, they will respond forcefully to any violation of that. So certainly those tensions will continue, Professor. And thank you so much for offering your expert analysis in all of this.
A brand new CNN poll giving a real-time glimpse into how Americans do view this conflict and the U.S. involvement in the fight. It suggests President Trump's decision to launch airstrikes against Iranian nuclear facilities over the weekend is broadly unpopular with the U.S. public. Let's get you CNN's chief data analyst, Harry Enton, with a look at the numbers for us. What have we got? And break them down for us, if you will. How do Americans feel about these airstrikes?
Yeah, I think it's so important to note before we begin that these polls are a snapshot in time, right? These polls were basically completed before the ceasefire, the supposed ceasefire was actually made. Still, I think it's so important to note that Americans, not fans of this. And it's not just the CNN SSRS poll, it's a Reuters Ipsos poll as well. All right, the net approval rating on the U.S. airstrikes on Iran. You see it here, 12 points underwater. You're 12 points more likely to disapprove than approve of the strikes on Iran. How about Reuters Ipsos? 9 points underwater. You're 9 points more likely to disapprove than approve of the airstrikes in Iran. And among independents, 19 points more likely to disapprove than approve of the airstrikes on Iran. And I will tell you, Becky, that these numbers are surprising to me from a historical perspective. Why? Historically speaking, U.S. military actions, at least initially, are quite popular. What do I mean by that? Well, why don't we go back through the time machine? We can go back to the ISIS strikes back in 2014. Look at that. You were 58 points more likely to approve than disapprove of those back in 2018 in the same general region, right in the Middle East. But compare that now to Iran. We are 11 points underwater. I have never seen an initial military action of the type that we had in Iran over the weekend by the United States of America be as unpopular as this one was. Again, this is a snapshot in time, but at least initially speaking, we're looking at a true historical anomaly and not in a way that President Donald Trump would like. Now, in the intro, you had Manu Raju talking with Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, talking about perhaps the Republicans were split on this issue. Well, maybe they're a little split, but Generally speaking, what are we looking at? The GOP on U.S. airstrikes on Iran. You can see it here. The vast majority of the Republican base, 76%, approve. They are with Donald Trump compared to just 18% on average in the Reuters Ipsos and, of course, the CNN SSRS poll who disapprove. So the bottom line is this. Yeah, there is some portion of Republicans who disapprove, who are with Marjorie Taylor Greene, but the vast majority of Republicans are with Donald Trump. This is his party. But when we talk about the overall electorate is not with Donald Trump, and that is truly, Becky, a historical anomaly.